Hey everybody, welcome back to Real Talk. That's Real Talk for real estate investors. I'm Chris Sanino, part of the Freedom Real Estate Group family of companies. It took me a second there. I forgot the name of our company. It's really bad. It's all right. It's been a long week.
Yeah.
Joined today with Erica Marcolini, coming back talk about dealing with problematic tenants and podcast 55 today.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, 55. I feel like I've been on a couple of these now, and I remember when we were like in the single digits.
Oh
so
my gosh.
now that we're up there, we're approaching retirement age. It's kind of I feel like we've been,
10 more years
such
ago.
a long journey. Yeah, so we're going to be talking today about dealing with problematic tenants, or we call them residents, so problematic residents, and some of the things that you assist in managing and kind of what we've done and how we're doing it differently than some of our peeps and competitors in the industry. And I want to kind of set the record straight right off the rip, but residents rent properties.
Yeah.
And we help facilitate their experience.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean that we bend to their will and do everything that they ask of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Part of your job currently as a maintenance coordinator is you're managing the expectations and the emotions and sometimes the financial obligations of our three main stakeholders, which is our residents, which are going to be the major topic today, our vendors who help do maintenance repairs, and our clients, our owners, who we manage their properties. And you're in a difficult spot sometimes to be able to actually do what's best for everybody and make everybody happy. Thus, some problematic tenants that come up.
Thus.
Yeah, so one of the big things I think right off the rip we can probably start with is we're just going to call them the complainers.
Dun, dun, dun.
The residents that you can never truly just make happy. There's always something that they're unhappy about. Give us a little insight, maybe a story.
Yeah, I think that we definitely have a couple stories that I could pull from. I love all of our residents, and I do my best for them.
Right.
There's just a few that you're like, There's this one property that the resident's been there probably for a little while, and they just had some like pretty big expenses come up, like some like big things needed to be done. I think they're the capital expenses, the CapEx ones. Yeah. So those are, those need to get done. But then there's all the little things that they also want to get done. And those are the things that you can't always make them happy. They want the doorbell fixed. They want this done, but they just got new windows, a new water heater.
Right.
Just because they needed it, you
know? Yeah, that's a good point. So for those that are maybe newer to real estate, CapEx or capital expenditures, those are usually bigger projects like roofs, windows, siding, lots of exterior stuff, maybe some mechanical stuff that's functioning. It's not a safety issue, but would definitely add to the value of the property if they were taken care of. Most of our owners usually just have like a plan for how they handle CapEx items. So I actually know what resident you're talking about. Yeah, and so that particular resident, I remember being a part of that conversation and kind of dealing with some of the owner's concerns with that. Like the owner, so this is a perfect example of like balancing the dichotomy of all the parties. The owner felt he's responsible, but he felt responsible to make sure that the resident felt happy. So when the resident explained, hey, 2 or 3 of my windows are failing, I'm concerned about safety, and I have children, and I've been here a long time and been a relatively good resident. We look at their rent, or if they're paying on time, and we look at the whole thing. The owner felt a little bit of ownership there and was like, okay, yeah, I can probably build out some windows. I can't afford 10 windows though. And of course we understand that his margin is, we're talking about $200 or $300 a month.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing.
So windows are $200 or $300 a piece.
Probably more than that right now.
So, before inflation.
Yeah.
Thanks, COVID. But we had to set the expectation of the resident, like, hey, the owner wants to take care of the windows and replace the water heater
And fix the garage.
And fix the garage.
Yeah, like that wasn't added.
But he can't do them all at once.
Mm-hmm.
We have to do it progressively. So what's the biggest thing? Water heater is the most important thing. And then the next most important thing, okay, the windows, your safety issue. So he'll replace the 3 that are broken that are a safety issue right now, but then the other ones that are failing, we will replace in a sequence. I think he ended up replacing...
I think it was like 4.
I think he replaced 4, which is half. And then he said, we'll kick the can down the road on the other ones till at least fall, I think is what he said.
Mm-hmm.
That way he can recoup some costs and then plan accordingly. Here's the kicker, though. Did the resident care?
Oh, no.
No.
It was the fact that they weren't all done,
Right. So you have the wonderful job of having to listen to her problems to the moon and bring her back down to earth a little bit.
Yeah.
And then reset expectations.
Yeah, I think like helping the residents understand that this is someone's like investment. This is their like long-term plan for maybe retirement. I mean, it's maybe just one small portion of it, but having them helping the resident realize that like this is like their income for certain things. So this is not necessarily, they can't just pull all this money and throw it into the house for, I don't know how long you're going to be there for, something might come up in a year and then you're out. And then the next resident has their list of complaints. It's just, it's never ending at that point. So just kind of like helping the resident realize like the owner wants to make it like livable and a nice place for you, but also come on, you have to like kind of give like the doorbell's not that big of a deal. Like we're not going to spend money on the doorbell right now. Get yourself a Ring doorbell, if you really want one.
Yeah, I think, and that brings up a good point. And there's some like internal processes on the front end, like I guess if it was a newer resident, right?
Yeah,
because we have the same thing from newer residents. I think we had one that just been there for a month or two, and she has a list of things. Mm-hmm. Those are different, right? Because they moved in and they identified some things like, hey, I accepted the unit, but these are some things that came in after I moved in. I'd like to get them addressed. That's a little bit more reasonable than I've been here for 3 years, and I think that we're just renewing her too. So like we had offered to do some upgrades just because she was renewing. Like the owner was willing to come in and I think we offered her like a couple light fixture upgrades, and I don't know if that was one of the screen door ones. I don't remember. We'd offered her a couple things, and like the owner had done that, and then all of a sudden, boom, gets slammed with a water heater and windows, and it felt kind of like a snowball moment where we gave an inch, they wanted a mile, and we compromised for a couple 100 yards. But that's a good point. But the key is, like I'd say, a lot of residents just generally don't care. They expect everything all the time.
They expect everything.
So one of the things that we're doing here at IPM, and one of the things, like I said, you've been really helpful doing, is changing the narrative on resident responsibility and accountability. Yeah. Starting with some lease revisions that happened last year or the year before, maybe, where residents are baseline responsible for all maintenance. There's always room for error there. There's some things that owners, they need to be their responsibility, but we always default to residents. Hey, it's your responsibility. This was fine when you moved in, not working now. It's your responsibility. Yeah. Obviously, water heaters an exception. Windows are sometimes an exception. Though we have had residents that have quite literally said, I think I saw a work order last month for this. Yeah. Where the resident was quite literally like, my son did this. And then when we hit her with a bill, she's like, I'm not responsible for that. And we're like,
excuse me?
Sure.
Like, what?
Literally said, my child did this.
Yeah.
I don't know. Was it a window? Was that one a window? Or was
that was a window.
Okay.
And then, like, the week after, there was another resident that was trying to, like, lie about it. She was like, you didn't do this one work order in a timely manner. And then now this has happened. And it was like, she said that the screen of the window had broken the window. And I was like, I don't think that's how that goes with wind and screens. Windows,
So there's definitely some...
like investigations, like little small investigations. It's kind of fun. Yeah,
there's some there's like a general, just in property management in general, residents tend to have a little bit of an entitlement
Some
mentality.
Some of them do. It's not all, and
it's
not everybody.
All of them. It's enough of the group.
I wouldn't even say it's a large percentage. It's probably like 20%. Because there's like properties that I find, I'm like, we have this property. I've never seen a work order for this one.
Right.
So
Those
that's
are the
great.
Fun ones.
Yeah, that's great.
Wait, we manage a property on Santa Clara? What?
Yeah, what?
Where's that at?
Yeah.
But, and it's maybe it's not just our market. Maybe it's just the industry in general. I think that's what my point was there, that residents tend to have like this, like, give me. And we don't usually allow that. It's one of those things where, like, we're adults, right? I use that analogy a lot. Like, we're adults and we rent to adults.
Sometimes act like children.
So there's some, need to be level-headed with that.
And that's something I really like about our company, because I feel like that really helps the owners or investors. Like, because they can see that we're caring about their finances. We're caring about what they're putting their money into.
Right.
So the fact that we hold accountable people that need to be held accountable, I just really appreciate that we do that. And the lease is like very easily laid out. I mean, I can go through it very quickly to find, like, right. Does it say that they're responsible for this? Like, it's very simple for me to find it. So, I mean, it's easy for the resident to also see that. Right.
Yeah, we were talking before this about, I think sometimes when we have leases signed, they just they just click through real quick. But, like, it's broken down, like you said, in a way that's like, these are the terms.
Yeah, it's like paragraphs.
This is what your responsibility is. This is what the landlord's responsibility is. Here's some procedural stuff that you used to be aware of. And they're signing and saying, hey, I've read this and I agree to this. And then as soon as they move in, a perfect example, I'm not going to say the property, but you're going to know as soon as I say this.
Uh-huh.
I was recently brought into the conversation because it's one of our properties. It's a turnkey property.
Okay.
We had talked previously on a different podcast about, like, one of the major pitfalls we had with rehab processes, that we were having a lot of main drain backups.
Oh, yeah.
And so we adjusted some processes and we built in a main drain scope as part of the rehab on every single property to make sure that there was nothing predictable blocking the main drain, so that way we can try to mitigate that for our clients in the long term. This property is one of those. This was one of the ones where we had done the drain scope and there was nothing obstructing it, and it passed on flying colors, and residents been there for 2 months, and now there's a main drain backup. And it's minimal when it comes to those. Like, there's a presence of some stuff backing up, and you guys had it looked at. We try to have we have a warranty process built in a little bit, so we had that vendor go back out and take a look at it again. He did the same process again. He's like, well, there's definitely an obstruction now. Here it is. Had it in his hand, showed the resident, and there was things being flushed down the toilet that weren't supposed to.
Yeah.
Resident did what?
She immediately said, I did not throw that down there.
Right. So now we're in this conversation about, should it be her responsibility? Should it not? I mean, I'm one of those, me. I'm like, absolutely.
Yeah. And the thing is I so didn't want to have to charge her. Like, this is when I try to have everyone's best interest in mind, right. I tried to find, like, maybe something had gotten missed in the, inspection. So I asked our, like, renovations team that did the inspection or had it done. And then I, was even going through with Chris about it. And he's like, I mean, maybe the cleaners threw down some toilet or what, the paper towels. And then I realized I had cleaned the property. I helped. I volunteered to clean it. And I was like, I know we didn't do it. That, yeah. So yeah, it was just so funny. Like, there was no way it couldn't have been, because the time that we got it inspected versus when it was completed, contractor complete, all the work had been done, was only a couple days. And there's no way they would have been able to throw enough to cause a blockage if they did do that, Right. So there was really just no way that it could not have been the resident. So. Yeah, and that, we go back to that balance is on one hand, we now know that it wasn't because of our rehab, but there wasn't an issue with the rehab that we can go back to the owner and say, hey, look, we messed up. We're going to take ownership. We're going to cover this. We're past that. It's definitely not that. No.
Now it comes down to two people are going to be responsible. So they're going to be the resident or the owner. How do we make that determination? Yeah. And per the lease. I mean, if we're going strictly by what the lease says, property was fine before they moved in. We verified that everything was good. They moved in, and now they're having a problem. We found out that there's things being flushed down. It's their responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Strictly by the lease. So that's where I go to. I'm like, what's the lease say?
Yeah.
And you're like, Chris, but the lease doesn't have emotion. The lease doesn't have human interaction and empathy. And so it's kind of an interesting thing. We can't track how our residents are feeling and being engaged to their emotion, and then also on the other hand, slap them with things that make them mad, right? So there has to be a balance there. So now, like, we're in the figuring out, like, okay, well, explaining the situation to the resident, bringing the owner in the fold, saying, hey, this is what we've done. What do you feel about this? Like, this is a good resident. She's paying her rent on time. This has been her like first major issue. The resident may say, hey, you know what? I'll cover half. He may say, hey, I'll cover the whole thing. But that goes back to like owner's interest. Like, he may only have a $200 or $400 profit margin per month, maybe, on this property. Plus, it's a new acquisition, so he's just getting through like his first mortgage payments and stuff on these properties. So we have no idea what his financial situation is, and his obligation to pay for this is zero.
Yep.
I mean, the reality is his obligation is zero, so he can say no. And then we have to manage the expectation with the resident. And we could have a really upset resident after this, more so than right now. Yeah. But I know that's one project you're currently working through.
Yeah.
That is just one of many.
Yes. It's one of the bigger ones.
But that particular resident, actually, I'm going to segue this into legal obligations. That resident, even in her rant, I was forwarded that message.
Yes.
Was like, I'm going to get the attorney involved, and this is what I call Google lawyers. Because the reality is the lease is very clear, and I have the honor of being a part of that process of building that lease. So I know it's ironclad and it's good to go. But, she's like, I'm going to get, my attorney involved, and you guys can sue me. And it's like, we never go that route anyway. So a lot of it's just her venting frustrations, and I can understand that. But there are legal actions we can take. And I try not to go legal route for maintenance-related stuff unless, like, they've intentionally damaged the property to the point where the owner is going to be eating years of income and profit to recoup. But, like, our legal parameters are eviction up to lawsuit. Like, we can sue tenants for damages and add things to their collections and all that stuff. But interesting ones are, and we're trying to wrap our head around like DIY residents, because owners taking responsibility and saying, hey, this is my fault, I'm going to pay for this, is not us giving residents free will to do their own repairs. I want to make that 100% clear. They are not allowed to do their own repairs. Now, I'm sure if like we have a plumber living in a property and he has a small sink leak, he may tighten, the fixing or whatever. But not a, hey, I'm reporting this problem, by the way, I fixed it. Like, that doesn't happen. Actually, I think of only one resident that's allowed to do that, and it's because they're one of our contractors. Like, they don't do repairs. Yeah. I do remember one situation, though, where there was a water supply line leak. So the water was oh no, I saw the face. You know what property I'm talking about?
I don't, actually. I'm trying to remember.
Oh, you're going to know in just a second, because we have like 3 people that will never go back to that property because of this. So the water comes into the building, into the unit in the basement, like through concrete wall, like probably 1.5 feet of concrete. Comes in the building, and it takes a hard 90-degree directly to a water meter. And then it goes from there to the rest of the supply of the house. It goes to the water heater, wherever else it needs to go. It was leaking right there where it comes into the house, right at the 90-degree. However, it wasn't leaking at the 90. It was leaking somewhere back into the wall, like as it came through the building. And we're not talking about a lot of water. We're talking about a little drip, obviously there's water coming in. If you know anything about plumbing, it's before the meter. You're going to have a certified plumber do it. Possibly have to pull a permit. Probably pretty sure we have to pull a permit. And you have to have the utility company involved in some regard because it is before the meter. However, because it's on that side, it's technically the owner's responsibility to repair, not the city's, right? Yeah. Because it's after the main shutoff, like the city supply shutoff. Yeah. Before the meter. So that was the backstory. we had one of our maintenance technicians go out, because we always try to send our maintenance first, because that's cheapest for our owners. Is just, if we can get it done for $50, we're going to do it for $50, call it a day.
Yep.
At that point, the picture the resident provided wasn't really clear what the issue was. It was just, we could definitely tell there was a small puddle. We saw the meter, but it wasn't like super clear. So we sent our maintenance technician at that point, and he's years of experience, looked at it and goes, yeah, you're going to have to get a plumber. Your supply line is leaking before the meter. We sent a plumber, a new plumber, by the way. We're testing out a new plumber. I think it was his first or second job with us.
I still have no idea who you're talking about.
Resident. He went in there, coordinated with the resident. Resident was already upset. Well, I had a guy here yesterday, and he wasn't and he didn't do this, and was like threatening to not let our plumber in. And we're like, at this point, and this is where I laid down the hammer. I'm a little bit more assertive.
Great work.
than other people in the company, where I'm just like, listen, you can't not let us in at this point. I start pulling out legalese from our lease and all this stuff, and you have to let us in, because there is damage to the property at this point. Like, you have to let us repair this, and if you don't let us in, that's fine, but we're going to do 24-hour notice. We are going to enter this property, whether you want us to or not. This is also why I don't manage maintenance, by the way, because she's definitely have a softer touch to how those things get managed. Resident didn't like that too much. There was some altercation between her, the gentleman that was living there, and the plumber. And the plumber looked at it, took a picture, gave us a quote, but then also in the same sentence said, and I'm not going back to that property, so you have to find somebody else to do it.
I remember.
Yeah, there it is.
What a situation.
So we had to go get a different first off, we try to salvage it, like, oh, come on, please, you were already there, like, I'm giving you the approval, can you just go right back in the door and do it? The owner doesn't really have much of a say at this point. Like, we have to get it fixed. That's one of those emergency situations where the owner can push back, but like, we have to get it done. The resident wouldn't let him, first off, he's like, I'm not going back, sorry. We get another plumber, and the resident at this point is going, I'm just having my uncle do it. And we're like, no, thank you. No. We have to get the city on the phone. Like, there's going to be a permit that we have to pull. And the resident's like, well, I already called the health department. And I don't know if anybody knows this, but I called the health department after he said that. And I said, hey, listen, you guys, I know you guys have your process. Absolutely do whatever you have to do. Understand, I can provide all documentation. This is what's happening. And this is what we're doing to try to remediate the situation. And by the way, this is within 72 hours of the work order being reported. We're not talking about a week. We're talking about mere hours and days. Yeah. And so I let the city know. And they were like, I don't think I've ever actually just had a property manager just call us and tell us that they just have a difficult resident and that they're handling the situation. She's like, honestly, I haven't even seen the claim come through yet, but I do see there was a call from that number, so this is probably getting processed. She's like, but just let me know how it goes. And that was it. Like, I called them back to let them know, like, hey, this has been resolved. Here's a copy of the invoice. And like, I don't think they even responded to that. Like, it was done. Nice. But that was a situation. And then from there, the resident reported like issues with siding, and all of a sudden the roof is falling off, and all of these other things started snowballing off of this. And it became a lot to manage, but honestly, it all started because of that plumbing repair. And I haven't heard from that resident for a while. No,
they've been doing really good. They have one situation going on right now, but
not a big blow up thing.
It's all good. It's all getting taken care of at least. Yeah. Yeah.
I think overall the team handled that really well. I remember that day because you were like, whoa, Chris, what's going on?
I think I walked into it like, what? I didn't know anything was happening until right now.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting project.
And I just want to give a little shout out because we have two other people that I get to work with. We kind of act as a team. We all kind of do the same thing in a sense. We got Jana and Lou. They are wonderful. Stars. They're so great. Yeah, they really take it on. So I'm thankful that I get to work with them because we have, what is it, like 560 properties?
Yeah.
That are units that we manage. Like, there's no way I can handle all of those
right.
work orders. So the fact that we have a team that is as good in handling it as much as we are, I think it's great. Yeah. So that's the reason I didn't know about that one, is because someone else was handling it.
Yeah, somebody was handling it for the most part. Yeah, and unfortunately, because you're local, like, because those team members are virtual team members, we're local, like, sometimes you have to handle the fire that is local. Because our office is local. Like, our office is right in the middle of our portfolio. Yeah. So we have randomly residents just coming in the office, and there very, very rarely is a resident coming in because they're happy. Yeah. I wish they would.
That would be fun.
I thought about just having like a stack of thank you for coming in gift cards just to give residents that are just happy for being here. Yeah. But that hasn't happened yet. I think maybe one or two are like, hey, I'm just here to pay my rent. And that's cool. Yeah. So unfortunately, we have the pleasure of being office folk that have to deal with that. And I think the example we did earlier with the windows, she comes into the office.
Yeah, she comes in a lot, and she gives me a list of things that she's upset about. So that has helped my customer service very much. Being able to work with that and those kind of situations, really. Yeah, that's what helps me the most.
Yeah, one of the difficult things we're dealing with right now, and this happens more. It's happening more during COVID for some reason, but illegal subletting. We've had 2 units in the last month where the resident moved out and just handed her their keys to somebody else, and that person moved in without even notifying us or anything. Like, we were following up because the rent wasn't paid the next month, and like, we opened the door and we're like, that's a new face. And they're like, oh yeah, I just moved in. I'm like, no, we've had a resident there for it's like 6 months to a year. They're like, oh no, that person doesn't live here anymore. Like, neither do you. So like, we're having to navigate that process with that tenant, and we try to, first off, we get on the last resident. Like, look, that's illegal. You can't do that. It's in your lease. No subletting. So then, honestly, they're responsible for the rent. Like, at that point, they love collections, I guess. But then the new person, like, if they're decent people, like, we'll keep them. I'm not gonna put a property into vacancy status if they're good tenants. Yeah, it's a little bit of a red. Actually, not a little bit. It's a red flag that they just moved into a property. So we're definitely very, very cautious about how we approach that. But that I think it's happened twice in the last month, which is really weird. I don't know if there's just like I don't know. I haven't searched the internet to see if there's like people advertising that as an income source. But yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting one. Yeah. That makes for difficult tenants too. Difficult tenant experiences too. There was probably 3 months ago where they put in a work order. Like, the person gave them access to the online portal. They gave them a work order. We went to call the tenant, and they were like, well, I'll have to check and see when my schedule for the work order. And then I guess they had to call the person they rented to.
Oh, so they were like really scheming.
Yeah, they were like real scheming. I'm just like, and then we showed up, and then we found out like, what happened is a cat was going to update the phone number. The person had reached out to update their phone number. And they're like, oh, and also I need the name changed. And we're like, what? Why do you need the name change? And it's because they weren't the same person anymore. And we're just like, goodness gracious. Yeah, they get a little bit creative. Yeah. So back to a couple of things that we're doing with residents that are a little bit different. We talked about the ownership, and I'm not going to say they share in the ownership of the property because that's not how that works. But they share in the accountability of how the property runs, which I think our owners appreciate. I think I can speak for the owners there. But one thing that we do with that is we look at the tenant holistically. Actually, you and I just talked right before we came in here about some of the things that we're helping train the rest of the team on doing. Jules, the person in our office that manages rent collection, she's not a part of the maintenance process, but maintenance isn't a part of rent collection either. But yeah, we look at rent sometimes in determining how's this resident really cooperating. These little nitpicky, like my light switch or this little thing, like, should we make the effort on somebody that's behind on rent and hasn't been very helpful in tenancy?
Something that you've taught me is that a lot of times when residents are like guilty of not paying their rent, they like to put in a work order like, well, you're not, doing my work order, therefore I'm not going to pay rent. So
Right.
it's like a way for them to feel like justified that they're not
Right.
paying their rent, you know? So it's just kind of like,
Right.
you have to, like, you help me realize that kind of stuff. It's
Right.
like,
And that's
all
where
right.
the legalese comes back out again,
Yeah.
where it's like, yeah, these are two separate things. They
Yep.
operate completely separate of each other.
Yeah.
Your obligation is to pay rent. Our obligation is to fix your maintenance concerns if it's within reason.
Yeah.
And there's some blurred lines there. And then like tenants have the right to withhold rent, but they have to go through a legal process to do that, which I don't think we recently talked about how that works. But you can't withhold rent because a light doesn't work in one room, right? It has to be a safety issue that I don't think residents necessarily realize that. At the time I've gone to court for that, by the way, that process is called escrow, by the way. Resident rent escrow. The times that I've gone to court for rent escrow, we provide all of our documentation because we take stellar records about every communication, about everything we've done, every vendor we've contacted, their responses. And I've never, actually only one time have we ever lost an escrow case. And the only reason why we lost that escrow case was because the resident was pregnant.
Oh, well.
It was a no heat call. The resident was pregnant. Now we had serviced that particular AC, that furnace, I think 12 times. So even though we were working on it, it was a high urgency to get repaired. And this is like years ago. This wasn't like recent. It's not a new process. And there were some like sticky transitions. We had just taken over the property and we weren't fully involved. But that's like the only time that we've ever lost an escrow case. And even then, like the resident already wanted them. She had already moved out. She was just trying to not be charged for back rent. So we had already moved on and gotten it fixed and went through the rest of the process. Residents are very interesting sometimes when it comes to their level of expectation versus reality. Yeah.
That's why taking such good notes is so important, because then anyone can kind of like hop in. Like if I'm handling, because maintenance coordinator, handling that, but Chris needs to jump in because now it's a legal situation.
Right.
Like documenting everything that we've done throughout the whole process is so helpful. And then just communicating really well. Communication is like the biggest thing, and my job is communication to the owners and to the residents that everything is getting taken care of, and just puts out, it like prevents any fires that could come up by just the communication efforts.
Yeah. And beyond that, like one of the hardest things to do, for me personally, is being empathetic. Like I care a lot. I almost care too much about certain things, but being empathetic to somebody who's not understanding your point of view when you're actually trying to help them. Like for me personally, that kind of puts me in a spot where I'm just like, okay, well, we'll just not do it. Or, okay, well, you got to pay for it. Like I'm less inclined to help somebody that's not kind of helping see the middle ground. But you and the rest of the maintenance team, actually the whole team, very, very empathetic.
Yeah, definitely. For me, it's like I'm kind of empathetic by like nature. So I've had to like kind of learn where to place it and where to kind of like hold back. Like that one example where you're talking about earlier about I didn't really want to charge the resident because she was very nice, and she was just genuinely, she was keeping me very updated. So it's like, oh, well, I don't want to do that to you. So, I have empathy. But then when it's a situation, again, that sometimes it's just like, well, there's really no other option.
Right.
So but putting it in a delicate way, like explaining the facts, explaining where it is in the lease and things like that. That's the best you can do to try to kind of like have a middle ground of empathy. But like, this is my job, I'm not going to like gut the owner because you're a nice person.
Yeah. Allowing all parties to be heard. And then, like I said, you finding the dichotomy, the balance to all of it, to be able to say, okay, here's your list of 10 things. Maybe not 10 tasks, but like, these are your 10 concerns from the resident. And then owner has these 3 concerns and they overlap here. And the vendor has this, stipulation. Where can we all meet in the middle and agree that this is the compromise and move forward? Because all that has to be actionable. Like we have to agree to stuff and then also be able to do it. And sometimes like the residents like no, I need all of these things done. And we're just like, no,
it's just not available.
Yeah, the hardest thing to do is to tell somebody that's angry that they're not going to get their way. Unfortunately, we have to do that.
Yeah. But that's, again, it kind of goes back to the communication aspect of it all. I realized that if you're genuine with people and you're genuinely like, I'm sorry, but this is not available, and this is why it's not available, typically people are like, all right, I get it. I mean, of course, there's the one-offs that are more challenging, but just genuine communication and not acting like a robot really helps in those situations to make sure that people understand your point.
So I want to give you a little bit of props because there's another situation I thought of that was very, very current. Like, actually, I think we're still kind of in the tail end of working this one out. And the compromise had to happen. And part of it was a portfolio issue of being able to get her service quickly. We had a resident move in. And that move-in was a little bit sticky because there was a couple things with the rehab that weren't 100%. That we weren't aware. It was not a face value thing. There was some things happening in the background that wouldn't have been identified in an inspection, like as the lease was already signed and the resident was moving in all at once. So we're literally the day that she's moving in, we're having to call her and shift some things and say, hey, you can still move in, but we're going to be in your business for a couple days because we're having to manage a couple things that we weren't expecting. She was really, really cool about it, right? Really calm. I'm like, oh, this is going to be a rock star resident. Usually residents are like, oh, this is a major inconvenience. I want compensated. She was very, very cool. We're like, all right, this is going to work out until she got moved in. And then she completed a move-in inspection and everything was actually pretty good. I think there was a few minor things that were super cosmetic and we're like, can you live without that? She's like, I'm just documenting. We're like, all right. Restored faith. This residence will be great. And then, like I said, she got fully settled, and we got through all the little knick-knacky repairs that had to happen as she was moving in. And then she reported that there was airflow coming in underneath her door. I think it was her front door. And she took a picture of it. And I was like, how did we miss that on inspection? You can literally see underneath the door. And it probably was just the hustle and bustle of just everything that was going on with that property that we messed up. So we sent our guy out there to try to get that addressed. And at first he's like, okay, well, it's not just the front door. It's also the back door. Back door is not as bad as the front. But actually it was raining when he went. He's like, it's actually hitting the door, running on the door, and then into the kitchen. And we're like, oh, no, that's not good.
No.
He wasn't able to mitigate it right then.
There was also something very specific on the door that didn't look good, and the resident was very much like, "This needs to be repaired too."
Yeah, that's true
I'm
too.
I'm OCD. I can't deal with it.
So he primed it. He went ahead and made it look a little bit better, but the weather has to cooperate in order for the paint to dry. And so there's other factors going in. We weren't able to mitigate everything in one stop. But then the hustle and bustle of everything else was going on in the schedules. We didn't necessarily lose sight of it. It was more of we need to do this. But then the resident got really demanding and kind of rude and a little bit disrespectful. And I don't know if she threatened anything legal, but I know usually when the resident gets to that level, I'm involved. So the fact that I know about it means that she was pretty hostile. Because we have such a great team that handles so much stuff that you included that normally things don't get to me. But when it gets to me, when it hits my radar. I'm having to figure out everything that's going on while everything we've done. And we started thinking critically, okay, resident's really upset. She just moved in, not a great moving experience. Owner had just bought the property too. It was the first tenant in this property. It was one of our Freedom properties. So it's okay, now we're managing owner expectations and we're in the full swing of emotion, trying to find light through. And I don't know who came up with it, but somebody's like, why don't we just deliver her something temporarily?
I think it was you and Mariah worked on.
Yeah, we're let's just give her one of those little sock things that you just put up against the door to stop the airflow until we're able to get our maintenance technician back with the proper piece of equipment to actually put it under the door properly so that way we can stop the airflow and make this resident happy. Cost effectively for the owner. We hashed a plan. You guys coordinated it, and the plan fell through because we delivered it to the wrong unit.
Yeah.
It was a duplex, and I guess the number wasn't on the door, and so we delivered it to the neighbor. Neighbor came into the clutch, though, because the neighbor's like, hey,
my woman there.
I think this is yours. And the new resident took it, put it on her doors, and now we're in the process of tightening that up.
Yeah, I think we finished it.
Yeah.
We finished that project now.
So that was like a scramble of 3 days of a little bit of chaos trying to get that all coordinated. Properties in Cincinnati, which is at the southernmost tip of our market. Next closest sub-market to that is 35 minutes away. So it's pretty far from our normal market. We're merging into that area. So it was hard to get somebody there fast. If it was in Dayton, we have a whole bunch of people in this office that will stop what they're doing and drive and make sure our residents taken care of. Cincinnati is a bit of a stretch. But we handled it, and it's turning out well. And I think, other than the resident changing the locks on us, I think it's actually that's the new development that happened this week.
I didn't know that. I think we even gave that resident an option. Okay, do you want to buy them yourself? We'll reimburse you,
true.
Or do you want us to stop and bring it down to you the next day? Because we couldn't do it the same day. So we were trying to be flexible and really help this resident. So, I mean, yeah.
And I'm an Amazon junkie, so I'm like, look, you can buy yourself, or we can deliver it to you, or I can have a 2-day ship to you. Which in that case, 2-day ship would have been Saturday. Yeah. And she was like, I want to deliver it. And so we delivered it on a Friday. Didn't realize it was messed up till Monday.
Yeah. So
but by that point, we just called the other resident, and it all worked out.
Yeah, she had already handled it. So.
Yeah. So it worked out. That was just one. That was a fresh one. That was a newer run.
Yeah. That took the whole team, really, because I didn't drive down to Cincinnati and deliver it. It took another part of our team to do it. And
Yeah, Jason, one of our ops guy, was like, okay, how can we do this economically without adding to other people's schedules? And we're like, oh, Mariah's going to Cincinnati.
Yeah, just so happened.
So it worked out. And
it's perfect.
It added 30 minutes to her route, but at that point, it's like, you're the closest there. It would have been 2 hours if I went and done it, 2.5 hours. So, then the team tries to keep me from doing stuff like that too.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, that's, those are a couple of things that we deal with problematic tenants in general. But I have to say, we told 4 or 5 stories here.
Yeah. We
manage 600 residents. Yeah. 600 to 700 residents, because some are multiple adults. So the fact that we only have 4 or 5 stories off the top of our head, it's difficult to manage emotion for one person, let alone almost 1,000.
Yeah.
And that doesn't even touch our owners. That's just residents. So when you throw in the mix that we have, 287 owners, that's a lot of people that have feeling actively about what we do on a day-to-day. And like I said, you and your team handle it with ease. I say with ease because you make it look easy, but I know it's
takes a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
There's definitely times that I take things home a little bit, and I have to really all right, it's okay. You did your best. Don't take it too personal. So that's something, that you have to kind of work through and grow through. And but because if you take your job and you care about people, take it seriously and just care about the people, it's you want to do everything you can for those people. But sometimes you're never going to meet someone's expectations. So.
Yeah. You and I connect on the arts and comedy and show business a little bit. We have some similar interests.
Yeah.
Actually, it was a comedy show when you happened to be in the same room, and we didn't even know until the day of. But you said that, and it made me think of this little round table thing I watched where there's a bunch of actors sitting in a room just talking about their experience of being actors. And I love that stuff. I feel like I was an actor in a past life or something. But I'm a bit of a comedic person too. But they were talking about how sometimes you get so much into character that it physically affects you, your mental health and your physical. You go home and you're still that person because you've literally tricked your body into being somebody else. And maintenance is that a little bit. It doesn't matter how you're feeling in the day. It doesn't matter you woke up and the coffee pot was empty because you forgot to buy coffee yesterday. Ultimately, like, you have to put on a face and you have to say, okay, I'm going to hit this in a perspective that shows empathy, even though I'm a cranky person today. Or the other way around, you're like, you are the office joy. Yeah, you're right up there with Miss Betty, with like the happiest people in the office. Getting on a hard call and being able to smile, shake it off, and go into the next call with a smile is a really hard thing to do. Now, Lou, on the other hand, I can never tell what emotion Lou is. She's the most, but she's funny. She is so funny.
Yeah,
when she
so
says
good.
stuff, she's hilarious.
Yeah.
But she never, like, I can count on one finger the number of times I've seen her smile.
Really?
And actually remember, like, oh, is Lou laughing?
That's funny.
She's smiling right now. And then I called it out and immediately went away. She was like, I'm not.
I'm just me.
Yeah. So that whole team, you and Lou and Jonna, handle that with ease. By extension, Kat and the other members of the team that have to handle complex resident situations or owner situations. I have to say I'm a little bit jealous because it's hard for me to do. It is actually difficult for me to get off a difficult call and then turn around and be happy about the next one. Mm-hmm. Same with wins. Like, we talk about, like, in my seat, like, I handle a lot of fires and a lot of the most difficult situations for this company and this family of companies. Hard to see the wins sometimes. So that's why we talk about wins every single week in our meetings. We're really trying to say, hey, look, this is what the team's doing, because it's hard to see sometimes when you're so close to the pit that there's good stuff going on. Yeah. So you got kudos to you and the rest of the team. You guys had a heavy lift. You talk about, in your vlog that we recorded earlier that you've only been here for 11 months.
Yeah, 11 months from yesterday.
So you guys had a huge undertaking getting maintenance to where it is now. From, I think we were up over 400 work orders, I think. It
was like 350.
Feels like a decade ago.
It was like 350 something.
Yeah, 300 work orders not even a year ago today, and now we're sitting at 150, which means that, to put that in perspective, that means that 10% of our portfolio is 50 doors.
Wow. Right.
So that means that a couple of those properties probably have one or two small things, or residents have put in a couple things. That means that less than 30% of our properties have work orders on them, which still seems like a lot, but when you really think about it, it's really not. And a lot of those are cycled through. We have like a 2-week turnaround average for work orders from creation to billing. So you guys do a lot in there.
Yeah, it's great. It's working on it. I'm getting better every day. We've got it down to almost, like, last week. For the last couple weeks, we had almost under 100 work orders. And that was like, yes. And then just things come up, The rain. When it rains a lot, you can expect a lot of work orders. Yeah. So. Yeah. Just people have problems with old houses, we have old houses.
Well, another thing, to give you guys credit, to kind of bring a little bit more, 150 sounds a lot, but we're also going to spring. I mean, we just went through Ohio's third winter.
Yes.
I always joke. Our weather in Ohio is like a Tolkien book, where you have breakfast and second breakfast and mid-morning tea and then lunch and second lunch, and we have like 4 versions of winter in the state.
It's very exciting.
Yeah. So we're finally back on the mend, and it's been raining for 2 weeks off and on. So you guys get a lot more work orders in the rain as the seasons, and then also we have HVAC servicing that's going on too. So there's an influx of HVAC services as we're preparing to get furnaces decommissioned and central air and AC units up. So there's a little bit of flex there. So
just taking care of things before it becomes a problem.
Yeah. So to recap, residents are fun.
We keep it exciting.
But without residents, we'd be out of job.
That's true.
So they're arguably the most important aspect of our organization, and their involvement and engagement in how properties run is crucial to our success. So their emotion and feeling and all that matters. There are difficult tenants.
Yep.
percentage is small, but there are difficult tenants. And one difficult conversation can set the tone for the rest of the day. So how we handle those situations is very important, and it sets the pace for everything we do. But we cannot control human emotion. No matter how hard we try, though the pharmaceutical companies probably say differently, you cannot control human emotion. So managing those expectations is definitely an art. And there's some fun stories. There's some stories I go home and tell family, and I'm like, you'll never guess what we had to deal with today.
Yeah.
Of course, I don't like to make other people's pain my joy, but you have to laugh at it.
Sometimes you have to cope
shake
with
it off.
Yeah.
And just like I said, be empathetic, create solutions, act on those solutions, and keep it moving. But I think that's it.
Yeah.
I think we've covered
a
lot more than what my notes even had down. So we like to end these things with a little invest smart.
Live happy.
See ya.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific personal or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions and information on this show are not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss.